Welcome to Singing Demystified. I am Cornelius of Voice Studio East, and I am here today to talk about vocal placement and hopefully clear up this confusing subject once and for all. The idea of placement seems almost inherently too mystical to have a place in this series, and yet I have found the concept of forward placement to be so pedagogically useful as to be nearly indispensable. Here, then, is my attempt to demystify the concept and turn it into something that is practically applicable. To begin with, I should like you to set aside any ideas about where you should feel vibrations when singing. This idea of trying to feel vibrations in the mask or trying to direct the vibrations towards your hard palate is a distraction. Placement is fundamentally about your psychological state, the intent that goes into singing. To give a very quick visual intuition for what I mean, this is backwards placement, and this is forwards placement. Forward placement is all about being fierce, upfront, and assertive. In a word, dominant as contrasted with the guarded qualities of backwards placement. But it is not enough to merely mimic the movements. If you do not enter the right psychological state, your instincts will find some way to make your movements restrained. While attempting to do a power pose, you might inadvertently raise your shoulders and tuck your elbows inwards, or you might make a ducking movement with your head. There are countless ways your instincts can adjust the movement to make it furtive instead of confident. All of this may seem quite irrelevant to singing, since, for example, your elbows are quite far removed from your larynx and vocal tract. But the key thing to realize is that your vocal tract and intrinsic laryngeal muscles are also instinctually responsive to your psychological state, and even to what you are doing with other parts of your body. To name an example, a sudden forceful contraction of the abdomen will bring your vocal folds and false folds together, resulting in a constipated sounding wheeze. As another example, making a sad facial expression with upturned eyebrows will automatically make my voice sound sad, like having a wailing sound to my speech. Finally, if I withdraw into a guarded posture like this, my voice automatically starts sounding tense and nervous. So, vocal placement is ultimately about your psychological state. But what is this about forwardness? Well, for one thing, the word forward has a semi-archaic usage in which it refers to speaking boldly without restraint or modesty, perhaps even with a bit of presumptuousness.
I apologize if I seem forward, but I must speak my mind.
But that just pushes the question back further. Why would boldness of this sort have become associated with a direction in the first place? Here, we finally get to the real core of the matter, that of directing your voice towards a particular place, which really just means focusing your mental attention towards a particular place. If, for example, you are very focused on the exact position of your tongue or larynx, then your focus is directed inwards toward your own body. None of your attention is directed toward the audience, and so you will seem to withdraw a bit into your own personal bubble. For example, your gestures will become more introverted, and your gaze might drop downwards or become abstracted, or you may even close your eyes trying to focus. This inward focus of attention will lead to a kind of self-consciousness that introduces restraint to your voice, much as the guarded posture from earlier did. This leaves us with the general principle that you cannot sing freely while simultaneously trying to micromanage your voice. On the other hand, the flip side of that observation is that you cannot consciously direct your tongue, larynx, and so on, while also singing freely. Therefore, when learning a new coordination, the best you can do is set up the general vocal tract shape you'll need, and then afterwards you can direct your voice outwards. Direct it outwards? Direct it where exactly, and how? Well, we instinctively speak louder when speaking to people further away, and we even adjust our projection strategies on the basis of how much background noise there is and how far away the listener is. You thus already possess the ability to direct your voice in a sense. More specifically, whether speaking or singing, you always have some notion of what sound you wish to produce. But what your voice sounds like will depend on the position of your listener relative to you. In other words, not only do you have a sense of what sound you wish to produce, you even have some sense of what you want the sound to be like at some specific location where the listener is standing. When you are conscious of the sound you are making, you are conscious of the sound as it occurs in some physical place. Obviously, you are only hearing the sound that actually reaches your eardrum and inner ear, but the parts of your brain associated with sensory processing will piece it all together into a coherent picture of which things are happening where and which sounds are located where. So when you wish to sing outwards, all you need to do is select some point in front of you and direct your voice towards that point, which means fix your eyes on that point and try to imagine what the sound is like at that point and adjust what you are doing on this basis. A lot of it really has to do with the direction of your gaze. It can be compared to archery, in which your eyes remain focused on the target, even while your hands and arms are moving to adjust the bow. In theory, it should be possible to focus your eyes on your hands and aim at something in your peripheral vision with only a comparatively small loss of accuracy. But in practice, this will make your mental aim be directed towards your own hands rather than towards the target you are trying to hit. This will tempt you to reduce the amount of energy you're applying, to drop your hands a bit and to pull your bowstring less far back, causing you to massively undershoot the target. And while you could potentially compensate by consciously applying more force when pulling back the bowstring, this will almost certainly result in a very stiff form. This is similar to how a singer with a guarded posture might compensate by adding more force, which will result in a harsh and effortful tone, and could perhaps even cause him to push excess air that will irritate his vocal folds and make him hoarse. And yet, returning to the archer, until he is so seasoned that the bow feels like an extension of his own body, our archer will still need some degree of awareness of what he is doing with his hands. At first, this will take up more or less his full attention, but after just a couple of repetitions, he should be able to think of the hand movements as secondary to hitting the target, meaning he should be able to be vaguely aware of his hands while subordinating this proprioceptive awareness to the goal of hitting the target. He is using his hands, yes, but he is using them to take aim, so his attention is still mostly on the target, even if some attention is spared for his hands. This is also how you, as a singer, should think about your tongue position, larynx position, mouth shape, etc. These are your hands, which you use to aim the sound. You can be aware of the tongue position, but it should only be in the back of your mind. It should be secondary to your awareness of what sound you wish to create and where you wish to create it. This way, you can achieve forward placement, and what's more, you will be able to open up your body language and become more available to the audience. But why exactly do we need this forward placement? Well, for starters, it provides a very nice clarity and sharpness to the sound, which is to say a considerable increase in the amplitude of high treble and upper mid frequencies. But it is also pretty much the direct antithesis of restraint, so we need it for any kind of unrestrained, full-bodied singing. In terms of physical movements, it actually involves a great many things. It involves an animated face, typically a large mouth opening, a head that's either protruded or raised, in either case opening the angle between the neck and the jaw. It also involves twang and supraglottic narrowing that assist the transfer of energy between the vocal folds and vocal tract, which is very important when singing in unrestrained coordinations like chest register or call register. You might then wonder whether forward placement is only important for chest voice, and whether we might perhaps need backward placement for mixed voice. Well, even setting aside that there are other registers that need to be unrestrained, like head register and pharyngeal voice, the answer is still no. Mixed voice is merely less forward than chest voice, meaning it might help to aim the sound about 1 meter in front of you, as opposed to aiming it at the back of the room. Such a decision has a lot to do with volume as well, with louder singing generally benefiting from focusing your glands at a more distant point. But for restrained qualities like mixed voice, you want to move that point a bit closer than what you'd use to produce the same volume with an unrestrained sound. So how do we practice forward placement? You might try to just pick the furthest corner in your room and fix your gaze upon it, trying to sing towards that point. But you may find yourself tensing up and pulling away from it, as if some stubborn instinct is convinced that you somehow need protection from that corner of the room. This is because it is generally not possible to go from being a beginner, whether at singing in general or just at the particular coordination you are trying to learn, but at any rate a beginner full of inhibitions, to a seasoned diva full of attitude, without needing a pretty lengthy process to get there. For example, perhaps you are able to achieve forward placement around the middle C, but become increasingly inhibited as the pitch ascends, because you are afraid that the high notes will crack or become squeaky. Conversely, you might also lose the forward placement as the pitch decreases, because the intensity and force will tend to drop, and it is hard to be bold and forward, in a word aggressive, when there is little force behind it. Unfortunately, I must tell you that an extended study of how to maintain forward placement across a wide range is beyond the scope of this video, because it relies on developing all sorts of registration skills that have taken me this entire video series so far to explain. I can, however, show you how to develop a very extreme forward placement in a comfortable range, so that you can at least get a first-hand understanding of what it should feel like. First, start by just raising your voice a bit, as if trying to cut above noise. You should speak boldly with considerable authority and firm hand gestures to really drive the point home. Now maintain that same energy level, but make it really bright and twangy like this, making sure the mouth movements are large and the face very animated, even to the point of hyperactivity. Make sure you are doing an open kind of twang, with an emphasis on open vowels and a wide open mouth. It is not a throaty gargle kind of twang like this with this inward sound. Make sure also that your eyes are not abstracted or contemplative, but fixed upon me. Try to lash me with the sound, as if every word were an attack against me. Once you have found the right kind of twang, you already have quite a bit of forward placement, but we can take it up another notch by adding even more intensity and, if you will, aggression. For this, we will need an aggressive, assertive phrase. Also, this time, instead of fixing your gaze at me, turn to face the furthest corner in your room and say, "And you can't talk to me like that, 'cause you know I'ma call the police on your ass!" If you were struggling, or if it felt uncomfortable, you were most likely using too much force and not enough attitude. You gotta turn the attitude way up to 11, and I'm talking like crackhead energy, like something out of Wolf of Wall Street. But you really don't need much force at all. Well, that's what it should feel like. Applying it to singing is quite another matter entirely, of course. Here, too, it helps to go for a very assertive song with lots of attitude. For example, I Will Survive by Gloria Gaynor. But you may find that as soon as the melody gets involved, and you have to actually sing on pitch, all the inhibitions might come back, and your posture might become guarded. Instead of a power pose, you might tuck your elbows inwards, and so on. You can use that as a visual cue for restraint sneaking in and for losing your forward placement. So make sure that instead of singing like this, "At first I was afraid, I was petrified, kept thinking I could never live without you by my side," it should be more like this. "At first I was afraid, I was petrified, kept thinking I could never live without you by my side." Once you have achieved this, you can work on taking it higher or lower, making it less bright, applying it to other registers or other genres of music, and so on. But hopefully by now you have got some notion of what forward placement is about, how much the voice responds to instinct, and how important your gaze is when singing. Now, to summarize what we have learned in this video. Firstly, placement is not really about where you feel vibrations. That's just a distraction. It is really about where your attention is directed. Secondly, the voice instinctively responds to changes of facial expression and posture. A sad facial expression will make you sound sad, and a guarded posture will make you sound nervous, and so on. Forward placement is pretty much the direct antithesis of such a guarded posture. You can achieve it by being bold and fierce in your body language and manner of expression. Merely trying to imitate the physical gestures of forwardness is not sufficient, however. If you are inwardly timid, your instincts will find some way of making your gesture appear timid on the whole. Finally, the eyes are very important when trying to achieve forward placement. Make sure the eyes remain fierce and focused, not wavering, and above all, do not let them drop, nor acquire an abstracted look, either of which would immediately direct your focus inwards and make your singing seem introverted. And with that, we've reached the end of today's video. If you have any questions, whether about vocal placement or about anything else, be sure to leave a comment down below. If you wish to get in touch, you can click the link in the description to join my Discord server, or visit my website at voicestudioeast.com, where you can also book lessons. Stay tuned, remember to like and subscribe for more content, and as always, thanks for watching.